Muda, muda, muda. In Japanese, muda is a word for waste. Entrepreneurs, organization, and professional waste around 4 hours of work time in unnecessary activities. Factories of Future believes that people should do more in less time. We analyze and identify gaps in processes and manufacturing environment. Further, quickly implement tools and systems which are easy to adapt, which results in substantial increase in productivity. We believe future factories should be sustainable, adaptive, and smart. These are the three cornerstones for survival in future. Are you progressive organizations who want to achieve greater operational excellence? Call on us. Be future ready.
All good.
Cool.
How are things at your place?
Very good. And you?
Going great. I mean, we are moving up the economy, and Diwali is the biggest festival. Every organization is just ramping up their production so that they could sell out more. So now they are just waiting for things to fly off the shelf.
Okay.
So I think the momentum of why was important, and maybe what comes first would be more narrow.
Well, I delivered episode 3 2 weeks ago to an audience here. Was received very well, and I think episode 4
Wonderful.
is next week. So
Mm-hmm. Great. Nothing with you. It is with us. Maybe some people are on holiday mode, and then again now for 2 weeks it will be same like this. So I don't want to postpone it. Then the whole schedule gets haywire.
are you recording this?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, good. So at least those that missed it can get a recording.
Yeah, absolutely. So we are gonna put it on YouTube, so then we can definitely have uh, on people can watch it. Okay, great. I think we should start now. Good morning, participants. Warm welcome to you all. It's really happy here to see you joining in, and some of you maybe have for coming joining in for first time. And as you know, we are organizations helping companies and organizations to move to future. And what I believe is that Future Factory has to have three important cornerstones. First is the sustainability. The green S stands for sustainability. Sustainability comes first, and as you know, organizations and governments are coming up with various regulations for environmental and sustainable. Second, the circle you see is adaptiveness, flexible. We have to be adaptive and flexible in whatever we are doing, and we should adapt to changes faster. And the blue F stands for smart systems and technology. We should implement smart systems and technologies to make our life easier. And the important factor here is that we should do more in less time. So what we are proposing is we should do more in less time. So I'm joined here with my friend John Broadbent. Last time we did a Industry 4 first series of seminars. So you're joining in for second part of today. The first was on why Industry 4, and we discussed on topics like what is Industry 4, do we have the foundation for Industry 4, why projects failed, and what are the leadership key important things we need to implement. So, to carry forward our discussions further, I have joined with my friend John Bradman. A little bit about himself. He is dedicated smart factory advisor and helping business manufacturers plan execute strategy for Industry 4. Around 40 years of experience in manufacturing across multiple sectors, most of these in factories. Uh, he has been seen in manufacturing elder, having created smart factories for local and overseas business. Realize Potential is an organization which he heads, and they offer coaching and mentoring service and success and strategies and implementation. So we also help organizations to make Industry 4 maturity path and assessment and readiness. And we are here to help Indian organizations to move towards Industry 4. So John, great, good to see you.
You as always, Faisal. Happy Wednesday.
Yep.
Happy Armistice Day. End of World War II, World War One.
Right. So the floor is yours, John.
Thank you very much. So welcome all to this webinar. This is part 2 of a 4-part series. Thank you to Faisal, Factory of the Future, for the opportunity to share this important information, and those that want to move along the Industry 4 journey. So as I said, this is the second part of a 4-part series. My name, as Faisal said, is John Broadbent. I'm the founder of a company called Realise Potential. I've been in manufacturing now for, I think this is my 45th year. So I've been here a while, and I've had lots of experience with smart factories. So here is the agenda for today. We're going to discuss, the first item is, do you have what's called low-hanging fruit, areas in your factory that you can get information from already in place? Second, where do you need investment? Thirdly, if we could go on mute, gents, that'd be great. How do you justify the investment? The importance of alignment, and finally, why it's necessary, I believe, to have an advisory group in your business to make sure that things work the way they should. So firstly, do you have low-hanging fruit? If you remember from episode 1, I introduced you to a concept I call the 3 buckets model. And this really comes into understanding how data is stored inside your manufacturing business. The first bucket is the green bucket. This is the bucket of that's easy to have. So the information may be information you already have in existing data repositories in your manufacturing business. It could be databases, could be SCADA systems, could be PLCs, could be historians. There's lots of ways that this data could be available, could be spreadsheets. And then we talked about having the blue bucket, which is the don't have yet, but you can easily get. That could be putting Ethernet modules on equipment that you can mine the information from. And then the red bucket is the harder bucket, and it's the bucket that often involves some CapEx expense or some OpEx operational expense in order to get the information out of it. We covered each of these in episode 1. Just to do a recap on what typical data sources most manufacturers have, it's important that if you want to go on this journey that you identify existing data sources in your landscape, systems such as databases, PLC, SCADA systems, MES, manufacturing execution systems, and even spreadsheets can act as those primary data sources. So really one of the first steps to recap on episode 1 is what can you get from your landscape? And if you remember, we also covered in episode 1 the importance of having the foundations in place. So I just want to take you through this before we get into the main body of the webinar, because if you remember from episode 1, you need to have 2 important foundations in place. The first one you need to have is computerization. So you must have equipment that is connected to, has controllers in it, like PLCs, like Siemens, Rockwell, Allen Bradley, etc., from which you can get the information, preferably with Ethernet modules on board. As you can see here, this one is connected with an Ethernet cable to the Siemens PLC in here. So it's important to make sure that the equipment that you buy has connectivity in terms of Ethernet modules, so computerization. And it's also important that you then have the connectivity piece, which is making sure that you can connect that equipment to a network, whether via industrial Wi-Fi or cabling, which then also means you need firewalls and switches and cybersecurity and all the infrastructure pieces on which this has to run and has to rely. It's also important that this connectivity piece is typically being managed by the IT department in your organisation, if you have one, to make sure that it is covered off and that your IT department can maintain and sustain the stability that you need, as well as the reliability that you need to make sure that you can get the data out of it. If you do that, you also need to be very careful that you don't drink what we call out of the fire hose, that you don't take too much information at once and end up drowning in data. I was at a paper mill in Sydney a couple of weeks ago where they're collecting 25,000 to 30,000 data points out of a paper mill every second. And the challenge for that business is that was just one of their data repositories. So it's really important to make sure that if you are going to collect data, that you are very aware of what you're collecting, why you're collecting, and how frequently you're collecting. And then what are you doing with the information when you get it? How are you going to store it for future retrieval? So that's just a quick recap on webinar one. And we're now going to go to the second item in the agenda, which is, where do you need investment? Going back to our 3 buckets model, this is really about the red bucket, the more difficult one to get, the CapEx and the OpEx. And often this requires investment in the connectivity and the computerization pieces. So this is about getting maybe old equipment, industry 3 equipment that might have old controllers or old PLCs, upgrading them and getting them with Ethernet modules so that you can put them on a network so that you can start the journey of digital transformation. Sometimes the equipment that you have might be so old that you can't actually get Ethernet modules for that equipment. So you can use serial interfaces if they have them, or you might have to upgrade the CPU on the PLC, or you might have to upgrade the whole PLC itself. When you do that, it's really important that if you have equipment, the most common issues that people have when they try and get old equipment onto a network is that accessing the information in the PLC is not easy, in that the information is often locked away or password protected. And I do know that quite a few machine manufacturers do password protect their source code, which is a challenge if you're a customer and you want to get that information out of the PLC. So it's very important to have access to the source code. It's very important that you can get that old piece of equipment onto your network. And you may need to invest, as I said, in some Ethernet modules or some what are called network address translators. I can share a true story with you where one of my customers had a $60 million smart factory making meals, making food, and they invested $14 million in a pasta line, state-of-the-art pasta line from Italy. The line was purchased, it was installed, about a 9-month project. And then when the thing was running, the operations manager was looking for information from the machine because the project team who'd bought and installed the machine had forgotten to do the integration piece. And so this machine ran for 6 months without any information coming out of it other than what was on the SCADA screen. And the operations manager and I worked with the Italian machine manufacturers, and it took us 6 months to get the data ready in the machine, in the PLC, and then connected and extracted and into the site processor story. And that whole project took us 6 months just to get the handful of data that we needed to get OEE, package counts, waste, productivity, and all that sort of stuff. So be very, very mindful that when you do a project or you buy some equipment, that you also have money in the budget to actually do the integration piece, which is connect it to the network and extract the data and put it into the back-end systems that you might have, such as a database. So you've now understood what needs to happen. You now understand that you have some low-hanging fruit. You might have some data that you can get access to, or you can make some investment to get access to that data. The question is, now what? Well, there's really only two choices at this point in time, and one of them is to go down the path of implementing an OPC UA server. For those of you that don't know OPC UA, it originally started off as OPC DA for direct access some 20 odd years ago, and it allowed people to directly access values in PLCs, so tags, registers, variables, depending on the brand and model of PLC that you use. And then OPC A and E was added, which was alarms and events. And then OPC HDA was added, which was historical data access. And so it became a bit of a challenge because as systems started to become networked, you had to decide whether you wanted OPC DA, OPC A&E, or OPC HDA. And a few years ago, the OPC Foundation globally got together and created the OPC UA standard, which stands for Unified Architecture. And it allows organizations now to extract information from an OPC UA server and put that information into storage such as databases or process historians. In the marketplace, there are a handful of OPC UA servers. I have particularly had experience with Kepware. It is now owned by a company called PTC, and I've been using Kepware for nearly 20 years. You buy it by brand of PLC, so you can buy a Siemens suite or a Rockwell suite, or if you have multiple brands of PLCs in your factory, you can buy a manufacturing suite, which covers about 150 different brands and model of PLC. You can also rent the software, so software as a service, for I think at the moment about $1,000 a year, I think. Another brand that I've had experience with is called Matricon OPC. They're also a company that has a good broad range of OPC service for multiple brands and models of PLC. Another one I've had experience with out of Germany is called Codesys, which is another available OPC server that works with lots of German PLCs like Siemens and Beckhoff. I think Beckhoff's Austrian actually. And then sometimes, this is a Beckhoff PLC, a particular model. Sometimes PLC manufacturers themselves allow you to embed the OPC UA server on the PLC CPU itself. And what that means is that as you have an OPC client, you can connect directly to the PLC without using Kepware or Matricon, and you can extract data and even browse the tag space inside the PLC to see what information is available. And then your OPC client can read that information and put it somewhere. So OPC has been the predominant technology for mining data from PLCs up to this day and is still very popular. With the advent of the industrial Internet of Things, which we discussed in webinar 1, there is now an emerging technology called MQTT. And MQTT is a standard for IoT messaging and stands for the message queuing telemetry transport. And it's an open standard, very lightweight, using what's called a publish and subscribe network model, and transports messages between devices. What does that mean in simple English? It means in this example, you could actually have, for example, a temperature sensor here on the left that's actually measuring temperature. It is a smart transmitter in that it sits on the edge and it pushes the information and publishes the information to an MQTT broker which sits in the middle, and it then publishes either to a laptop or to a mobile device or to a dashboard after these devices subscribe to the MQTT broker. So there are quite a few MQTT brokers out there again that you can use, rent, buy, and you can make that information then available to third-party devices such as laptops, mobile devices, etc. Because I'm based in Australia, I'm going to take you through just a handful of organisations that I know who are using both of these technologies to get data out of existing manufacturing processes. The first one is a company called ERM Power. They will come into an organisation in Australia and they will install power meters, current transformers inside manufacturing switchboards. They will broadcast that data up to their own private cloud, and they will then provide you with electricity consumption reports. There is an initial capital cost, obviously, for the current transformers, but the rest of the service is a rental service. So it's software as a service, or service as a service in their case, because they also have a look at your power and they use machine learning to monitor how much power is used on particular machines for particular products, and they can then tell you whether you're using more or less power on a particular day. So they will actually do the analysis for you. Another example is Blue IoT. They're a building management group based in Melbourne here in Australia, and they will come into your organisation and provide all the infrastructure, transmitters, controllers, etc., in a multi-storey building where they might have an old building management system like a Yokogawa or something like that, and they will provide that kit for free, but you pay for it on a monthly operational rental, so monthly OPEX, and they will monitor your air conditioning, your HVAC, your cooling towers, your chillers, and they will remotely control them to minimize your building power usage. And in fact, some of the work they've done here in Melbourne, they've reduced electricity costs on multi-storey buildings by up to 50%. So they're very, very popular and an emerging business. And then we have a company like 2XE, which are also a power company. They effectively are a consulting company that in Australia's case will come in and have a look at what you do and possibly even get you grants from the government to actually help you minimise your power costs and put in equipment. So I hope from that you can see, a bit more of the 3 buckets model. What do you already have that's easy to get? What can you get without too much trouble? And where do you have to spend money, either through CapEx or OPEX, in order to get the information that you need? This then takes us to the third part of our agenda, which is how do you justify the expense? And this has been a common stumbling block, a common hurdle that I'm finding businesses have, is justifying the expense. This is a quote from a CIO magazine. If you want to read this, it says, for IIoT deployment, industries must invest in high upfront costs for new hardware and software and ensure smooth data integration with their legacy technology. In other words, CIOs have been put on notice in manufacturing that they need to start investing money in hardware and software to integrate their legacy systems into a smart factory concept. And the very fact that CIOs are now recognizing this and being educated around this means that they're aware that they have to do something in the investment cycle to prepare their factories to become smart. In the first year, it's difficult because for the investment to light up a factory, put in networks, Ethernet modules, switches, firewalls, servers, etc., there's very little, if any, return on investment. So it's really important to make sure that the CIO knows that this is a 3 to 4 year vision. So it's a multi-year journey, with the first year putting in the foundational components ready for years 2, 3, and 4. and to eventually return some money on that investment. Just like a house or a multi-story building needs foundations, the industrial Internet of Things and Industry 4.0 and smart factories need foundations as well in the technology side. And it's very and vitally important that organizations recognize that in year one, there may be no return on investment. And in years 2, 3, and 4, that an investment will start to yield something. Just like in a multi-story building, you can't live in the foundations. Just like in a factory, you can't do Industry 4 without computerization and connectivity. So the next question then is, well, if there is no return on investment in year one, how do you get commitment? And really the commitment comes down, in my view, to a very simple question. And it is, do you want to stay in business and manufacture efficiently or not? If the answer is yes, they must do this. If the answer is no, then that's fine, but eventually they will go out of business because they won't be able to compete with the businesses that embark on this digital transformation journey. And just so that you're aware, Industry 4.0 is 10 years old next year. And already people like McKinsey's are noticing that the quote here from their global lighthouse network, which is a group of 54 manufacturers around the world, and they are being watched very closely by various bodies and consulting groups. And this group, the Global Lighthouse Network, was put together by the World Economic Forum. So the businesses are invited by the World Economic Forum to become part of the Global Lighthouse Network. They don't make lighthouses, but they're companies like Danfoss and Schneider and Siemens and Johnson & Johnson, and quite a few of them that we know as common names. But this red comment here, the gap between the fourth industrial revolution frontrunners and the majority is growing rapidly. And therein lies the problem. It's really, really, really important that if organizations don't start and start soon, that they will be left behind. This is from the same report, and I want you to pay particular attention to the blue dots and the black dots. The blue dots represent the end-to-end connected value chain using Industry 4, and the black dots represent those businesses that have just implemented Industry 4 inside their four walls of their factory. Again, people like Siemens and Danfoss and Hitachi and Johnson & Johnson. What I want you to notice particularly is that the graph, the chart here, starts at 0, which means none of the businesses went backwards by embarking on this journey. And there's one lucky business here that had a 200% improvement in factory output. Yes, that's a spectacular result. They must have been pretty bad to start with. But what's important is if you look in this area from 0 to 100, there is a lot of improvement across a range of the typical sort of metrics that a manufacturing organization needs to improve, like factory output or productivity or OEE, or cost reduction, or water reduction, or waste reduction, or changeover times. You know, the changeover times here goes from 30 to 70%. Like, this is not small amounts of money. This is a huge amount of additional cost. And in fact, shortly after I produced this webinar, I read another report from Deloitte's across a whole range of their own businesses that they've done research regarding Industry 4, and they were showing that there was 10% improvement in output, 11% improvement in productivity, and an average of 12% improvement in labor utilization. And again, that's not 1 or 2%, that's 10, 11, and 12%. So if you could pick up 10% improvement in your output, 11% improvement in your productivity, and 12% improvement in your labor utilization, that's a huge amount of money that you can add to the bottom line of the profit of a manufacturing business. So to quickly recap and go back to the McKinsey report, these were the 4 key findings that came out of the report. Improved agility and customer centricity across end-to-end manufacturing, faster recognition of customer preferences, quicker adjustment to manufacturing flows, and small-scale plants. They also found supply chain resilience provides a competitive advantage. Speed and productivity are retained through increased levels of automation and workforce augmentation. And eco-efficiency is increasingly considered a must-have. In other words, the world is starting to recognize that we can't keep producing the waste that we produce or the waste streams that we produce. And we are now heading down the path of, particularly in Western countries, I'm not quite sure what it's like in India yet, but the circular economy is very much alive and well here. And it is not being driven so much by government. It is being driven by private industry, because waste streams that end up in landfill are now being heavily taxed. So the incentive is there for organisations to either recycle their waste or to sell their waste to another process. If you remember the whole Industry 4 progress that we talked about, Industry 2 happened in 1870. So imagine in 1870 when electricity was invented, if you can invent it, and suggesting that you weren't going to use electricity, you're going to continue with steam power. Or in 1969, when Industry 3.0 started, suggesting that you were going to stick to old relays and panels and you weren't going to use automation and PLCs and computers. It's really the same now with Industry 4, and electing not to implement Industry 4, it's exactly the same as saying that back in 1870 or 1969. And the challenge that I'm seeing for a lot of manufacturers is that Industry 4 is now 10 years old next year. And we have enough evidence now from the McKinseys and the Deloittes, and my personal experience in helping organisations become smart factories. We have enough evidence now to show that those organisations that are doing the Industry 4 journey are actually doing really, really well and doing a lot more with less and being far more efficient. And so the question I have for you is, if not you, then who? And if not now, then when? Someone has to start. It may as well be you. And if you're having difficulty in your organisation with your voice of reason, this is a quote from a famous man called Sigmund Freud, who says, "The voice of reason is small but very persistent." If you know that you're on the right side of this Industry 4 decision and you're making noise in your organisation that you need as a company to go down the Industry 4 path and you're not being heard, keep telling the people above you this is something that they need to look at seriously and need to invest in, because there is also a very high cost of doing nothing. And we have seen many organisations who've sat on the fence and not done what they knew they had to do to keep up with disruption, and they have closed up as a result. There's been lots of organisations in history that have done this. So to our next part is the importance of alignment within the business to make sure that it's doing what it needs to do and that the business is aligned. Digital transformation is a whole of business approach. It doesn't have to be big bang in that you don't have to do all the business at the same time, but it means that the leadership of the business has to commit that the business is going to go on the digital transformation journey. That could be digital transformation across the supply chain, in human resources, in marketing, in sales, through social media, in manufacturing. There's lots of areas that digital transformation affects. And it's important that the business leadership commit to that journey, understand what that journey looks like, and then put a strategy in place for different parts of the business to make sure that the journey is monitored, controlled, governed, sustained, and that the leadership are aware of what's going on. This is a quote from a guy called Peter Senge. He's one of the world's leading specialists in change. And he says, business and human endeavors are systems. We tend to focus on snapshots of isolated parts of the system and wonder why our deepest problems are never solved. In other words, I've seen many organizations have a problem in one area and they will apply a solution to that area, just a small, what I call point solution, but it doesn't solve the overall problem. And he's the author of a very, very profound book that I read many years ago called Presence. And it's how change moves through an organization. And I would highly recommend, if you can get this in India, that this book is an amazing book. And you can see here that Peter Senge is one of the authors. It's a very, very unusual book, and it explores how profound change happens in people, organizations, and society at large. And one of the things I'd like to share from this book is, in the end, it's all to do with alignment. Yes, you can go out and you can buy a new system and you can put it in, but if the people and the processes that system supports aren't aligned, that system will never work well. And I'm sure you've all had experience of situations where systems have been put in place but haven't actually worked. And that's usually because the processes that the system is there to replace or enhance are broken. So when you digitize a broken process, you get a broken digitized process. And often the people piece, the training, the change management, and all that are not done well. So only if you have alignment between people, the systems, and the processes themselves in this sweet spot here, will you get a successful projects. And so where Industry 4 is at the moment, particularly globally, is summed up in this quote by Pat Riley. There are only two options regarding commitment. You're either in or you're out. There's no in between. And I've just put a video out on LinkedIn, episode 10 in the series, about sitting on the fence. And it's how to get off the fence and how to make sure that you do something different, because you have to commit to either do it or commit to not do it, and be aware of the decisions that flow as a result of that choice. Well, that brings us to the last part of our agenda, which is the concept of an advisory group. Back in May 2017, this was a headline in Cisco that 3/4 of IoT projects are failing. And I covered in episode 1 why this might be, but I wanted to revisit one of the key findings. And one of the key findings, it was the second one, was don't go it alone. The top 5 challenges: time to completion, limited internal expertise, the quality of the data, integration across teams wasn't there, and they overran their budget. But this one, number 2, limited internal expertise, was seen as one of the top 5 challenges as to why these projects were failing. In other words, organizations didn't know what they didn't know. So rather than going outside and getting external expertise, they went and did it alone and failed as a result. And this really boils down to whether the leadership thinks that they know everything, or whether the leadership knows they don't know everything and are prepared to get help to make sure that the investments they make are successful. And when you consider 3/4 of projects are failing, it's of vital importance that organizations go out and get the help they need from people who've done this before and who know what to do and how to do it. Which then means the best way to do that is to create an advisory group of some sort in the organization, represented by people within the organization and perhaps external advisors that have specific skills, but it needs to be a cross-functional team. So operations, engineering, IT, automation, etc., so that the organization has commitment at all levels and understands the requirement for the advisory group to steer the project to success. It is also really important that the name of the group is meaningful to your business. I have seen names such as advisory board, such as advisory group, such as an advisory committee, a steering committee, a steering group, and even a supply chain council is one I came across a few years ago. It doesn't really matter what you call it, but committees and groups and boards tend to have different functions. So it's really important as an organisation that you define what you want this body to do. Is it to develop a strategy with the business, price and cost the strategy and support the application for funding, then supervise the strategy as it's being implemented and adjust the strategy as needed with outside influence and expertise. The great thing about advisory groups in general is that they create value. Some organisations think, oh, that's just an additional cost that we don't need, and yet they can create value by bringing in outside expertise that you wouldn't otherwise have. They typically follow a strategy, whether it's yours or theirs or a combination of both. They hold people accountable because they're external to the business. The advisory group has a mandate to hold people accountable for delivery, which controls your costs and time to market. They often know what works from their experience. They can be very, very cost effective. And the wonderful thing is they don't actually exercise control. They're there to advise what needs to be done and how to do it. So to bring this to a conclusion, have a look around your business and see where you have the low-hanging fruit, the fruit that you can pick, and grade the information you have using the 3 buckets model into easy to have, can get, or I need to invest some money in a CapEx, OpEx model. Be aware also that it is a multi-year journey. So yes, you may not get a return on investment in that first year of investing in computerization and connectivity. Make sure you create an advisory board of some sort that holds everybody accountable within the business for their part of the solution, and then actually commit to the journey ahead. Don't do it half-hearted. Don't do it with no money, no time, no budget, no resources, because it won't set it up for success. And you'll join those companies that have had a 75% failure rate in these projects. Stick with it, follow the strategy, make sure it's being implemented, and you'll be in a good place. So thank you for your time and attention with episode 2. Connect with me here on LinkedIn if you wish. You can find my details in LinkedIn. And now we can go into a Q&A, I believe.
Yeah, John, it was wonderful overview of what comes first. Couple of questions. Wouldn't be sometimes organization in a race to move towards Industry 4 or to satisfy or get some publicity to help or to show their stakeholders and investors they are moving into Industry 4? But I see most of the organization go into some kind of wrong direction and create some islands of excellence.
Yes,
So what do you think? I mean,
because they haven't put together a strategy for the next 3 to 5 years of where that little piece fits. And so you end up doing point solutions and you have pockets of excellence, as you say, but there's no integration that then has all that talking to each other. And so the integration of that through mashups, dashboards, reporting, analytics can't happen until all that information is in at least a place where it can be shared and reported on. Some organizations are using data lakes like Amazon AWS S3. Some organizations are using, IBM, Google, Microsoft Azure. It doesn't matter what you do as long as you get the data into a place where you can then look for the information that you need.
Okay, and one more thing, what kind of thing when you say what comes first, I mean, is it also possible that sustainability also has to look towards the same time as the productivity? Because that is
Absolutely.
also, circular economy is also a key agenda for the governments here.
Absolutely. And you'll find that if you're doing a sustainable project, so this organization I was at recently, talking to a company here, actually has a license to print money. They're a money printing company.
Wow.
The guy estimated they're losing between 10 and $12 million every year in waste.
Oh,
So
okay.
pick up 1%, there's 120,000. Pick up 4%, there's $1 million. So there's
Wonderful.
lots of opportunity.
Yeah, Mr. Patra, you have a question?
Everybody else on mute, but me and you.
Yeah, I just make them unmute so that. Uh, yeah, Pradeep.
I think we're, they're all silent.
Hmm.
No questions in the chat box? No.
So there was one of our two hands raised. And Pradeep, can you? Okay.
Of Industry 4.
Yeah.
And I believe of the episodes, it's one of the best.
Yeah. So
I am good. No questions from my side, from Chandra Sakar.
Okay. Thank you, Chandrasekhar. It was a pleasure to have you. I was sometimes the steering committee, the advisory board, what organization adapts to for Industry 4. I have also seen, John, that some of the machines manufacturer also are blocking the data with licenses for to capture the data. Because I
Don't
was,
buy their equipment.
yeah, so the sometimes when we were doing a pilot project with one of the organization and it was a challenge to get the data because it has been blocked by the machine manufacturer.
Don't buy the machine.
Yeah. And
That's my advice.
there is another device like Beagle Bone. We can use that also to capture the data from the machine. Beagle
A
Bone
device like
Black.
what, sorry?
Beagle Bone Black.
That.
This is a small device which we can attach to a machine with RSG port, and then we get the data. It is a kind of small computer, and then
Okay.
from there we can migrate the data into computers and get the analytics.
Well, if you remember this slide, just let me find it for you. If I can just share this slide, just bear with me a second. And I share this screen. You can see that?
Right.
So a good colleague of mine
Mm-hmm.
who also plays in this space, I'm more the educator, he's more the technician who sits at the back and makes this stuff work.
Mm-hmm.
A client that they landed a few weeks ago had a problem, and the problem was a remote tank farm. And they had looked at getting tank levels out of this tank farm, but the cost of wiring, internet, Wi-Fi, cabling, everything was very, 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 very expensive. So they built small control panels, solar powered, and the data for the level transmitter, here is a temperature transmitter, they used a level transmitter. The data from the level transmitter was pushed and published to an MQTT broker in the cloud via a technology known as LoRaWAN, Long Range Wide Area Network. I'm sure you have LoRaWAN providers in India. It's a private domain wireless cloud, effectively.
Mm-hmm.
And once the unit or units were put
Yep. Mm.
you can see UB dots.
Mm.
Probably not. Let me just
Uh,
new share. That's the wrong share. Sorry.
yeah.
This is
There we go.
the UBDOS platform.
Mm-hmm.
And the time to get the data from the edge device published on the LoRaWAN network up to a MQTT broker and into the UBDOTs and actually design the dashboard was 1 day. 1 day's worth of information.
That is incredible. Great. I think the first thing, definitely, organization has to embark on the journey with a long-term plan. And as John said, that how we should plan the step two of the implementation, that is what comes first. And of course, there are very important aspects, that is sustainability, circular economy, and productivity are key important factors for organization who wants to move on this journey. So it was a great discussion with John on the part two of the series, and sure we will have another session of part three in December next month. The dates are on our website, and definitely you will get an invite as well. John, thank you very much for being here, and very good insights to what comes first on Industry 4.
Thank you.
Definitely, I see there is a lot of gap between the front runners and the followers. And I think the gap has to be reduced, because the front runners will always adopt the new technologies, new things first. And the followers will always try to keep up and match to them. And the last one, the last ones are laggards, who are thinking on the fence, and who are thinking to jump the bandwagon but not still decided. So organization, so participants, thank you for joining in. I wish you a happy Diwali and a great season this weekend. Enjoy with yourself and with your family, but be safe and don't venture out if not necessary. We know it has been very, if we lose our guard this week, we are sure that maybe next week or something there will be a lot of difficulties. So if participants are ready, if somebody can open, I mean, they can show a video, so we can take a small snapshot of all of us. Then we can take a, yeah, for first one, if you have not attended, then we would definitely are going to put it on a YouTube, and you will able to see it very well. So I will just take a snapshot. So yes, Mr. Natarajan is also here. If you can put your video on, I could we could take a snapshot of uh, all the participants. Great. So I'll just take snapshots and say cheese. Great. Great. So wonderful. It was nice to interact. Pradeep, you had question. Pradeep, so you raised a hand. Can you unmute yourself, Pradeep? Can you unmute yourself? Yeah, can
capex
you?
and opex.
Yeah. What is your question?
I've lost him
What is
again.
capex and opex?
What is capex and opex?
So typically, Pradeep, CapEx is capital expenditure where you would go and apply for some money to buy a brand new machine, tens of thousands of US dollars. And OPEX is the day-to-day operational expense, which is usually not part of the capital expenditure budget. So in most organizations, if someone comes along to you and says, I want to sell you this $10,000 machine, you have to go and get capital expenditure authorization to be able to buy it. But if someone comes along to you and says, I'm going to rent you this machine for $500 a month, it comes out of your operational expenses and you don't need to go and get capital expenditure approval.
Okay, thank you, sir. Thanks a lot.
So thank you, participants. It was a nice interaction with you. And John, thank you very much. And you take care of yourself. And I heard that you have a pet also. What is his name?
That's 3 dogs.
Okay.
He's Enzo.
Oh, wonderful. So it's quite a Japanese name.
Enzo.
Okay,
Well, it's
great.
actually Italian, Vincenzo.
Oh, great. So, John, take care of yourself
Thank
and
you.
your family. Thank
You
you,
too.
participants, for joining in. And we
See
are
you in
closing in
December.
the session, and see you in
Okay, thank you, sir.
December for our third session of our series. Great. Thank you
Bye-bye.
very much. We end the meeting here. Thank you.